He set out before sunrise when the sky was a soft gray and the air still felt cool on his skin. The cowboy liked the quiet of the early morning, the way the land opened wide in front of him, clean and simple. He planned a long loop across the ridge and down toward the dry wash that wound past the cottonwoods. He hoped to bring home food for folks who counted on him every now and then. He packed water, a simple lunch, some clean cloth, a length of rope, and his bedroll rolled tight and tied on the saddle. His horse moved steady under him, hooves pressing a calm rhythm into the earth as birds woke and began to sing. The trail was familiar, but he never let himself get lazy. He watched for fresh tracks, for changes in the ground, for the way the grass leaned. He noticed the small things because the small things could tell him much. A broken twig meant someone passed through. A shallow print meant someone was light on their feet or moving slow. The cowboy was not afraid, but he respected the land and its people. He knew it was not his place alone. The sun rose pale gold and then brightened, lighting up the red rock to the east. By the time he reached the dry wash, the heat had begun to settle in. He paused under a cottonwood to drink and let the horse rest. That was when he saw not far off a shape that did not belong to the usual lay of stone and brush. At first he thought it was a fallen branch, but the shape did not fit. He slid from the saddle, looped the reins over a low branch, and walked toward the shape with slow steps and open hands. As he got closer, he could see a person on the ground near a clump of sage. It was a young Apache woman, still and quiet, her face turned toward the shade. He stopped a few paces away and crouched, making sure she could see him. He said a soft hello, then said he meant no harm. His voice stayed low and even. She opened her eyes and he saw how tired she looked. The color had drained from her face. He noticed at once that her leg seemed hurt. It was wrapped with a strip of cloth that had slipped loose. He did not move closer until she gave the smallest nod. He kept his hands visible, slow and careful in all he did. He offered his canteen. She took a small sip, then another. He watched her throat work as the water went down, and he felt a little weight lift from his chest. He asked if he could look at the hurt leg, and he waited until her eyes told him yes. He cut a clean strip from his cloth roll and did not pull or press hard. He found a straight willow branch nearby and made it into a simple brace. He used his rope to tie it with even spacing, not too tight. Every few moments he glanced at her face, reading it for signs of pain. He did not speak much. He knew that words could be too heavy when someone was worn out. When he had finished, he offered food from his pack. Just a bit of dry biscuit broken into soft pieces and a thin slice of apple he had saved. She took the food in small bites and held his gaze now and then, measuring him. The sun climbed higher and the heat grew. He looked toward the ridge and then down the wash. The open path would be faster, but the open path also meant more eyes, more questions, and maybe more worry than anyone needed. He chose the longer route through broken hills and patches of shade. He told her his plan in simple words, that he wanted to bring her to shelter, that he would not move her until she agreed, that he would go slow. She gave another small nod. He stepped back and set about making a carrier with his bedroll and rope, the kind he could pull behind the horse. He patted it with his folded coat to keep her as comfortable as he could. When he returned, he explained each step before he moved her, asking permission with his eyes and waiting for her answer. Lifting her took care and patience. He slid his arms under her shoulders and knees, keeping her leg as still as he could. He moved in one smooth rise and set her down gently on the carrier, then eased the blanket around her so the sun would not burn her. She held the edge of the blanket in one hand, and he saw how strong she was even in tiredness. He tied the carrier to his horse and checked the knots twice. He gave her water again and made sure the shade of his hat brim fell across her face. He did not put the hat back on. He let the sun press on his own head and neck, and he did not mind. They began the slow walk toward shelter. The path wound between low hills and broken stones, then dipped into a cool pocket with a trickle of water where he refilled the canteen. The horse stepped careful and steady. Dust rose behind them in a thin line but then drifted away on the light wind. Now and then he spoke a few calm words, telling her what lay ahead. A rise, a curve, a place where the ground tilted. She listened without reply, but he could feel her steady herself for each small change. When the ground grew uneven, he paused to check the carrier and adjust the rope so nothing rubbed. The sun gave no mercy at midday, and the air shimmered. He led the horse beneath a stand of juniper where the shade was deep. He found a smooth, flat stone and poured a little water on it to cool it, then dampened a cloth and set it gently across her forehead. He rested too, not sitting but standing watch, eyes on the horizon. He did not dwell on worry, but he stayed alert. This was not a time to rush. It was a time to do the next right thing, then the next, steady as a clock. When her breathing evened, he let himself take a few bites of bread and a sip of water. Then he checked her leg again and made sure the ties were firm yet kind. In the afternoon, clouds gathered in the far distance but offered no rain. He chose a narrow cut through a ridge that would keep them hidden from open view. The ground there was rocky, and he cleared small stones from the path with his boot so the carrier would slide smooth. He noticed the way she watched him now and then, not with fear but with a careful trust that was building by inches. He did not try to fill the day with talk. Silence, he believed, could be a kind of comfort when shared with respect. As they walked, he also thought about the line between care and harm. He knew that sometimes help, if given without listening, could do the wrong thing. So he kept asking for her agreement with gentle looks and small questions. Is this okay? Do you need more water? Do you want to stop? He learned by watching what eased her face and what made it tighten. When a gust of wind picked up grit, he shifted his own body to block it. When the path sloped, he laid his hand on the carrier's frame to steady it. He was not a doctor, but he knew how to be patient, and patience was its own kind of skill. Late in the day, shadows stretched long across the ground. The heat at last began to fall away. He told her they were not far from his small cabin, a plain place with a roof that kept out rain and a stove that could warm water. He promised a clean bed and quiet and fresh bandages. He did not promise more than he could give. It was important to him that words matched truth. When they topped the last low rise, he pointed. A simple building near a line of trees, a small pen for the horse, a wooden bucket sitting by the door. He felt a soft relief then, not a loud feeling, but real and deep. At the cabin, he led the horse to water first, then turned to lift her again with the same care as before. He carried her inside and laid her on the bed he had made with the cleanest sheets he owned. He opened the windows to let in the evening air and lit a lamp with a small flame. He boiled water on the stove, washed his hands, and set out fresh cloths. He told her each step he would take, a rinse for the leg, a new wrap, a cup of warm tea with honey to settle her. He did not touch until she nodded yes. He worked slow and steady, and when she winced, he paused and waited for the calm to return. When the care was finished, he placed the cup in her hand and let the quiet settle. He stepped back to give her space and set a folded blanket at the foot of the bed in case the night grew cool. He placed his bedroll by the hearth, making it clear he would sleep there and keep watch. He set an extra cup and a plate within her reach so she would not have to ask if she did not want to. The cabin filled with the soft sounds of evening. A cricket outside, the whisper of wind through leaves, the gentle creak of the roof as it settled. Tired now, she closed her eyes for a time, then opened them, and gave him a look that held thanks without words. He answered with a small nod and a smile that did not demand anything back. He understood that thanks, like trust, could not be rushed. He sat by the hearth and mended a frayed strap from his saddle, his hands moving in quiet rhythm. Every so often he stood to check the kettle, or to add a small piece of wood to the fire so it would not burn too hot. As the last light faded, he stepped outside and looked up at the sky. Stars began to appear, first one, then a few, then a scatter across the dark. He breathed in the cool night air and felt the day's weight shift. He was aware that his choice to bring her here would bring questions from neighbors. He did not fear questions. He would answer with simple truth. He found someone who was hurt and he helped. That was all. He believed in doing the good that lay in front of him. It was not a plan or a rule he wrote down. It was a way of being. Morning light slipped through the window and painted a soft line across the floor. The cowboy rose from his bedroll at the first sound of the kettle. He moved quietly so he would not startle the woman. When he looked over, he saw that she was awake and watching the window, calm but tired. He offered a gentle smile and asked if she wanted tea. She gave a small nod. He poured warm tea into a tin cup, stirred in a little honey, and set it on the table within her reach. Then he turned back to the stove and began a slow, simple soup. Water, a bit of vegetable, and a pinch of herbs from a jar he kept on the shelf. He did not rush. He washed his hands, laid out clean cloths, and checked the wrap on her leg. She watched his hands as he worked, seeing how steady they were. When he needed to lift her leg to adjust the bandage, he told her first, waited for an answer, then moved. She barely spoke, but her eyes said enough. The pain was still there, but not as sharp as the day before. He could tell the rest had helped. After the soup had simmered and the cabin smelled warm and good, he carried a bowl to the table, pulled a chair close to the bed, and ladled a small portion for her. She ate slowly and drank more tea, and color began to return to her face. Outside, the day opened bright and clear. He stepped out to care for the horse, refilled the water bucket, and cut kindling. Every few minutes he checked inside to be sure she was all right. After he swept the floor and folded the extra blankets, he stood near the door and thought about the next step. He knew that the right thing was not only to help her heal, but also to make sure her family knew where she was and that she was safe. So he looked through a small box where he kept items he had found along the trails. Tiny beads, a feather, a smooth stone. He took out a short length of cord and a carved sliver of wood. Years before, a friendly neighbor had once explained a simple way to leave a neutral sign, something that meant peaceful help, no harm, when words were not shared. He would not pretend to know more than he did, but he could leave a respectful marker at a known path. He told the woman where he planned to walk, just to the boundary trail and back, and how long he expected to be gone. He poured water into a second cup, set it near her, and placed the small bell again on the table by her hand. He promised he would not be far, and that the door would be open. She met his eyes, and after a quiet moment gave a slow nod. That was enough. The path to the boundary trail wound through a mix of trees and open land. He walked with an easy pace, eyes scanning for fresh tracks. The morning wind was gentle and carried the scent of dry grass and cedar. At a small fork where the ground was open and clear, he found a place where signs were often left. He placed the carved sliver of wood through the cord and tied it to a low branch. He stepped back and checked it once more. Nothing loud, nothing proud, just a clear sign that someone was being cared for and could be found safely. Then he turned and started back home, making sure to follow a wide circle so he would not reveal the exact route to his cabin. When he returned, the cabin was peaceful. The woman rested with her eyes closed, her breathing even. He set a fresh pot of water on the stove, then sat by the door and mended a strap with slow, careful stitches. When she stirred, he asked softly if she needed anything. She shook her head and settled again. He let time pass at the speed it wanted to pass, not faster. Healing, he knew, was not a race. Over the next 2 days, a rhythm formed. He washed the bandage in warm water and changed it twice a day. He kept the room clean, opening the windows for light and air when the weather was gentle, closing them when the afternoon heat rose. He cooked simple meals that were easy for her to eat and sipped tea beside her, so she would know she was not alone. She began to speak a little only when she chose to. She gave small pieces of her story, and he took each piece with care. He did not ask for more than she wanted to share. He learned that she had been walking with 2 relatives when she hurt her leg on bad ground. They had tried to help her along, but the season's heat made it worse. They split up, one to look for water, another to find aid, and in that time she drifted toward the wash and could go no further. That was enough to know for now. On the 3rd day, the cowboy noticed hoof prints on the trail near his fence that he had not made, and a light mark on the dirt where someone had stood for a long moment and then moved on. He felt his heart beat a little faster, not from fear but from the weight of what might follow. The sign at the boundary had likely been seen. He took a steady breath and reminded himself to keep every choice simple and honest. He trimmed the lamp for the evening, checked the horse, then returned inside and told the woman in gentle words that he believed her people might be near. She did not look surprised. She sat with a quiet strength he had grown to admire and asked for water. He handed her the cup. The next morning he saw 2 figures on the far edge of the field. They waited near a stand of trees, not hiding but also not advancing. He stepped outside and raised one hand in a slow, open greeting, palm visible. He did not carry a rifle or even a tool. He wanted his shape to say, "I mean no harm." Then he took a few steps forward and stopped. The figures remained still, watching. A long, quiet moment passed. Then the woman's voice came from the doorway behind him, soft but steady. It was only a few words, but they seemed to carry a great deal of meaning. The 2 figures moved closer with calm steps. One was older, with lines at the corners of the eyes, and the other was young, with a careful gaze that missed nothing. They looked past the cowboy and toward the door. The woman raised her hand just a little, and the careful tension in the air eased. What followed was not a loud scene, but a quiet exchange. The cowboy spoke a few simple sentences, and the woman added her own words in her own language. The older visitor nodded slowly. The younger one set down a small bundle wrapped in cloth, dried meat perhaps, and something that smelled faintly of sweet herb. The cowboy stepped back from the doorway and invited them to see the woman's bed if they wished, to see how clean and calm the room was. The older visitor walked to the threshold, looked in, saw the neat stack of cloths, the kettle on the stove, the open window. The woman spoke again with a small smile, and the tension dropped another notch. A quiet understanding moved through the room like fresh air. They did not crowd her. They did not stay long. They spoke in low voices for a few minutes while the cowboy stood near the hearth, hands by his sides, not interrupting. When it was time to go, the older visitor looked at the cowboy and gave a small, firm nod. It was not a full smile, not yet, but it was respectful. The younger visitor picked up the empty bundle and tied it at the waist, then looked back once at the woman, who raised her hand in a small farewell. The two moved away toward the trees and vanished into their soft shade, as if the land had opened to let them pass. Inside the cabin, the air felt lighter. The woman let out a breath that seemed to travel all the way down to her toes. The cowboy tidied the table and said he would make more soup. She nodded and closed her eyes for a moment, not from pain now, but from relief. When she opened them, he was already stirring the pot. The rest of the day felt easier, as if they were walking on smooth ground. Neighbors did hear, of course. News travels in quiet ways in open country. Some rode by and asked light questions. The cowboy kept his answers clear and short. He said he found a person who needed help, so he helped. If someone brought extra flour or a roll of linen, he thanked them and did not gossip. If someone spoke in worry, he listened, then went on with his chores. He kept his days clean like he kept his cabin, simple, steady, with nothing extra to stir up trouble. He trusted that good work would speak for itself better than any long speech could. Each sunrise brought a small step forward. The woman could sit up longer, smile more easily, and share a few more words when she liked. The cowboy set a stool by the door so she could watch the world, birds hopping in the dust, clouds drifting, the horse flicking its tail in the pen. He found a few wildflowers by the creek bend and placed them in a jar on the table. She touched the petals with her fingertips and followed their bright colors with her eyes. One afternoon, after a week of care, her relatives returned, this time closer, standing within speaking distance of the porch. The cowboy stepped out and greeted them the same way as before. Open hand, slow movements. The woman called to them to come in, and they did, with care and respect. The older visitor examined her leg, nodded, and spoke a few words to the cowboy that sounded warm and steady. The younger visitor, who had watched everything closely the first time, set down a small gift, a strip of beadwork with soft colors arranged in a clean, strong pattern. The cowboy accepted it with a slight bow of his head and set it on the shelf. He did not make much of it. He held it as a quiet honor.